We begin with a day people around the world have been waiting more than a year and a half for.
Yeah, the United States now back open to travelers from 33 countries, but they have to be fully vaccinated. It's the first time the U.S. has opened its borders to so much of the world since March of 2020. Under the new rules, in order to enter the U.S., foreign travelers must show proof of vaccination and the results of a negative COVID test taken within 3 days of traveling. The lifting of this travel ban comes as COVID cases have dropped here in the U.S. since the Delta surge, but cases are back on the rise in some parts of the world, including Europe, where some countries are now reporting record outbreaks. On a positive note, though, more than half of the world's population has now received at least one dose of a COVID vaccine. That's more than 4 billion people. We have a team covering this major day for travelers, reuniting with family and friends. NBC News correspondent Rahima Ellis is out at New York's JFK Airport. NBC News foreign correspondent Matt Bradley is in London. So, Rahima, let me start with you. Who is now allowed to enter the U.S.? What do they need to know before they get on that flight?
Yeah, first thing, good morning to both of you. It is a good news for many international travelers. As you point out, that travel ban has been lifted, but there are some restrictions, as you mentioned. I want to put up on the screen, full screen, so people can see this, so we can show as well as tell them. First and foremost, all adults must be vaccinated, must have a negative COVID-19 test within 72 hours of their flight. Children under 18 don't need a vaccine, but they must have a negative COVID test, and kids younger than 2 are exempt from testing. Now, this is something that travelers need to absolutely be aware of before they head to the airport, because without following some of these protocols, it'll be very hard, if not impossible, to get on that international flight. Kate?
And now, Matt, this is the first time that most travelers in the UK have been able to come to the U.S. since March 2020. So, I mean, are people rushing to do so to get to the other side of the pond? What are people leaving today telling you?
That's right. 602 days exactly since the last time that there was free travel into the United States. And apparently at Heathrow, there were, people were waving American flags. It was a very emotional scene. We even spoke with one couple who said that they were going to the U.S. to meet their daughter's fiancé for the first time. So it was actually a really emotional experience there at Heathrow. But I'll let you guys listen to them yourself. Here's what some of these passengers had to tell us.
I could cry.
Yeah.
I'm so joyful I can cry.
Yeah.
I've only ever dreamed of this moment.
Yeah.
678 days I've waited. All we've been able to do is, video chats and things like that. So we've not been together for that long.
Excited. It's been a long time, so I think mostly relieved that we have a concrete date. So very happy.
So, people are flying everywhere into the States, but where's one of the top destinations that we heard about? Well, of course, it was Disneyland. Savannah? Kate?
Oh, not New York even? All right, so Rahima, once these travelers come into the U.S., how do they enforce the rules? How do they know if they've had the vaccine? How does that work?
Well, one of the things that's happening is before people book their flight, they're going to have to make certain that they have adhered to these restrictions as far as traveling is concerned. And the airlines have the responsibility of checking their vaccination status and whether or not they come in as negative in terms of those testings for COVID. In addition, if they do not, the airlines could be fined up to $35,000 per violation. The airlines are also going to be expected to get information for contact tracing if that becomes necessary. And how is all of this going to be monitored? There will be CDC workers at the airport on this side who will be checking to make certain that those protocols have been met. Kate and Savannah?
And now, Matt, this is, of course, a major boost to the travel industry, which has been hurting over the last year. I mean, how's this impacting airlines and bookings? Are people running to get on a flight?
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about one of the biggest travel hubs in the world, and it can almost seem like flying to America from the rest of the world is big business for here in London. And, that's one of the reasons why this was actually such a big deal just for the companies themselves. And, so few people are going to notice this, but actually rival airlines, British Airlines and Virgin Atlantic, decided to celebrate this moment by doing a rare simultaneous takeoff from parallel landing strips in Heathrow Airport at 8:30 a.m. And you rarely get to see that. This would be lost on everybody. It's almost just for the pleasure of these companies. And we heard from the CEO of British Airways. Here's what he had to say.
Well, I think one thing we've been seeing since the corridor opened up is real enthusiasm for businesses to get back on the road again and to start travelling. And I think we've been very impressed with the scale of pickup on corporate traffic. But of course, the US is, the #1 FDI investor in the UK, and the UK, I think, is the #4 biggest investor in the US. So the links are very strong, and travel, of course, is a key part of enabling that economic activity.
So, of course, this is a big deal for this huge industry, but it might take a little while. There's there's something like 2,600, nearly 2,700 flights that are going to be taken off to the United States from here in London just this month. Now, that's 20% more than last month, but it's still 50% less than the same time 2 years ago before the pandemic began. So we can expect it might take a while before everything gets back online, but that's to be expected. Guys?
Yeah, definitely. Rahema, one more question. So Americans, the flip side of this is Americans have been allowed to travel to and from several countries like the UK for a while now. So are there any changes for Americans with these new rules? What are the requirements for us?
Well, Americans, if you are indeed an American citizen, your point is a good one, Kate. Americans have been able to go back and forth because even over the summer, Americans were making their way into Britain. But unvaccinated citizens will not be requested to be vaccinated, but they must get a negative COVID-19 test a day before their flight. And vaccinated U.S. citizens must show proof of vaccination, again, get that negative COVID test 3 days before their flight. So there's some safety protocols that they're asking American citizens to adhere to as well, Kate.
All right, Rahema and Matt, thank you so much.
NBC News medical contributor Dr. Natalie Azar joins us now. Dr. Azar, always great to have you. So let's pick it up here with travel. How can people safely travel right now? We've got the holidays coming up. Borders are opening to people. What should people know before they book a flight, and especially if they are going to head abroad?
You know what, I think here is where we really should spend some time talking about how useful and important the layer of testing really is. You know, one thing that people really should think about is using the testing to their advantage. And what I mean by that is that, as we know, the PCR test is considered really kind of the most accurate, but rapid tests are really, really accurate too. Remember, the rapid tests especially, they don't care how symptomatic you are, they care how much virus you have. And most of them will be positive once you become contagious. So the best way to layer up testing in terms of traveling is to PCR a couple of days before you travel, lay low, do a rapid the day you travel. You could do another rapid when you arrive 3 to 5 days later, and certainly upon return. And again, this is, you know, you're always taking into consideration your own health status and the people you're visiting. But I really think it's a time where testing, again, we've said this from the beginning of the pandemic, becomes even more imperative as borders are opening and people are traveling more. Savannah.
Such an important reminder, especially as the vaccine has become, of course, this tool that we're talking about so much, that testing is still so important.
Absolutely.
Now, Doctor, I want to ask you about kids and vaccines, of course. This is big news that we just got last week. Kids as young as 5 now eligible for the shot. So now we have this news. The mayor-elect of New York City says he wants to end mask mandates in school by the end of the year. First, let's listen to what he said.
We're going to do it with the science. That is crucial to me. Let's follow the science, but I hope so. I think part of the development and socialization of a child is that smile.
So he mentions the science. So question here, 2 questions actually. When do you think the science will show that it's safe for kids to not wear masks at school? And at the top of this, I mentioned this kind of in light of the fact that COVID vaccines have been approved for 5 and up. But I mean, surveys are showing that only about 30% of parents plan to actually get their kids the shot right now. So what do you think about this and masks?
Well, look, I mean, I think what he's saying, you know, I think both things that he is saying are true. And one is that we want to end mask mandates, and we also want to follow the science. And, you know, he is giving himself a little bit of a cushion there, I think, talking about the end of this school year, which is quite a ways off. Look, what I will tell you is that we have to wait to hear from the public health experts about which metrics they are going to follow before relaxing the mask mandates. You know, my kids are both teenagers. They've been vaccinated since last spring. We have a reasonably high vaccination rate where we live, and they're still masking in school. And why is that? Because we know that until we get to a certain percentage of vaccinated individuals within the school system, that includes teachers and students and staff, as well as the rate of transmission in your area, that is an essential part of the layering strategy in addition to ventilation and everything like that. So, we'll see. I agree with you. The numbers in terms of percentage of parents who are eager to get their 5 to 11-year-olds is not too encouraging at this time. I think within a few months, we're going to see that number increase, but I'm going to rely and defer to the public health experts to tell us when it's ready to take the masks off.
And Dr. Azar, final quick question for you. As this rollout does get underway for kids, it's really supposed to be in full swing this week. Talk to us about vaccine equity. How do we make sure that families in rural parts of the country are getting those shots for their kids?
Well, this is why, Savannah, it's so important that what the administration has done to ensure or promote equity is so important. And that is to have hospital systems, schools, pharmacies, and really trying to elicit the help of, pediatricians' offices to do these vaccinations. This is not something that I think we're going to see a similar situation we had with adults, where people with means and people in large urban centers easily found themselves a vaccine, it really got to the head of the line. This is going to be incredibly important. And by the way, one of the major factors in approving or endorsing an authorization from both the FDA and the CDC was about equity, given that we know that there's a disproportionate number of children of color, who become hospitalized and become more severely ill from COVID-19. It's imperative that they have access to this vaccine, Savannah.
All right, Dr. Natalie Azar, as always, thank you so much for joining us.
Savannah, let's turn to that concert in Houston that turned deadly Friday night. Just moments into rapper Travis Scott's headlining performance, the crowd surged to the stage. 8 people were killed in the crush. One of them was just 14 years old. Hundreds more were injured. Now, police have opened a criminal investigation into that tragedy, while Scott and the concert organizers also face several civil lawsuits. NBC News correspondent Jay Gray joins us now from Houston with the latest this morning. Jay, good morning.
Kate, Savannah, good morning to you. You can see the growing memorial behind me here. Candles, flowers, notes, all laid along the fence line here that surrounds the venue. It is still locked down as the investigation continues inside. Officers from multiple departments now trying to understand exactly how and why, and seemingly within minutes, things got out of control inside. A lot of the focus on the security effort. Here's what Houston's mayor had to say about the situation.
We'll continue to talk to Travis Scott's people. We'll talk to as many witnesses as we can who were present last night. We are talking with individuals who have been hospitalized to try to get a much better understanding of what took place, what went wrong, where were the missteps. Certainly, HPD and other law enforcement organizations will be looking at as much of the video footage as possible.
Yeah, Kate, so a lot to unfold here and still so many questions left unanswered.
Yeah. And what do we know about the 8 people who lost their lives there? And what about the others who are still being treated for injuries, Jay?
Yeah, very young, from 14 to 27 years old, 8 victims of the situation here. You had 17 transported to area hospitals, at least 10 still in the hospital this morning. The youngest, a 10-year-old who's in critical condition. And we're told at least 300 people were treated by medics on the scene here.
And on Friday, after the concert, Jay, Travis Scott posted a story on Instagram. I want to quote from that. He said, "I could just never have imagined the severity of the situation. Yeah. We've been working closely with everyone who is just trying to get to the bottom of this. The city of Houston, HPD, fire department. I'm honestly just devastated." One of the civil suits filed against Scott over the weekend says that he has a history of inciting violence and creating dangerous conditions for his concert goers. What do we know about his conduct during the concert, and could that come into play with these legal suits?
Yeah, I think it definitely could come into play as you talk about these civil suits that are being filed in this case. And during the concert here, he did pause several times, at one point calling security over to try and help with someone who was obviously struggling in the crowd. He said that he couldn't really understand everything that was going on, couldn't perceive how serious the situation was. He's known for his high energy on stage and for mosh pits, crowd surfing, stage diving, things like that during his concerts. We know, talking to those who were inside, that there was a lot of pushing and jostling in the acts leading up to Travis Scott taking the stage. And a couple of things that may also come into play here. In 2017, he was arrested after encouraging fans really to bypass security, to rush the stage. You had a security guard at that concert as well as a police officer, some fans injured. That was in Arkansas. Then in 2015, he did plead guilty to reckless conduct. That was after Lollapalooza in Chicago. At that festival, he again urged people to bypass security and to rush the stage. There were no serious injuries there. Kate?
A lot to follow. Jay, thank you so much.
To Washington now, and the Biden administration taking a victory lap after the passage of that $1 trillion infrastructure bill. But it's unclear whether that will help his sagging approval ratings and improve Democrats' chances in the midterm elections. Speaking Saturday, President Biden emphasized the bill's direct impact on the American people. Here's some of what he said.
For all of you at home who feel left behind and forgotten in an economy that's changing so rapidly, this bill is for you. This is a blue-collar blueprint to rebuild America, and it's long overdue.
The bill had major bipartisan support in the Senate, but Democratic margins in the House were slim, and President Biden's approval rating took a hit in the process. This all comes as Democrats remain divided over the major social safety net spending package, that other one we've been talking about. NBC News White House correspondent Mike Memoli joins us now with more on all of this. Mike, good morning. So let's start, of course, with the infrastructure bill that's passed. Just how big of a win is this for President Biden?
Well, Savannah, it's a big deal substantively, and it's a big deal in terms of the impact potentially on the Biden administration. Let's start with the substance. Remind people of some of the key provisions that were in this $1.2 trillion program. $110 billion on sort of the traditional nuts and bolts of infrastructure, roads and bridges. $66 billion for passenger rail. We know President Biden, his affinity for Amtrak, they're going to get a big boost here, as well as public transit more broadly. Some of the other significant proposals here, $65 billion for expanding broadband access, especially in rural areas, and $55 billion to really, as Biden has talked about repeatedly through this process, replace so much of the lead pipes throughout this country. Now, in terms of the impact for the administration, this really all came a year to the day after Joe Biden was declared the president-elect. And we know how important this president has felt it was to follow through on the promises he made to the American people. This infrastructure plan was one big part of it, but it's just one part of it. We remember that there's still the second part, which is that larger reconciliation measure, some of the other social spending programs, and that's still a work in progress, Savannah.
Yeah, and it's even still a work in progress, of course, as we've been talking about, within President Biden's own party. So it's still getting that pushback from centrist Democrats. Where does that stand this morning, and is the president confident it's going to pass?
So there's a little bit of a respite for this week. Congress is out of town. But what we saw on Friday night, that very late vote to pass the bipartisan infrastructure bill, some of the last-minute wrangling was about getting moderates to really effectively promise that they would be there in the end to support the social spending proposal as well. We saw a late statement issued from Josh Gottheimer, who is a Democrat from New Jersey, who represents a lot of that larger moderate bloc in the House. He did say, as did some of the others, that he was going to be there in the end. But that's just the House. We know, Savannah, that this is going to be a ping-pong process back and forth between the House and the Senate until we really know what's in the final draft, what's going to make it through the parliamentarians. So there's a lot of work still to be done here.
Okay, and Mike, as all this work has been getting done, we've talked about how President Biden's approval rating took a pretty serious hit. And then, of course, last week, after we got that approval rating, Republicans also won back the governor's seat in Virginia, which was a big blow to Democrats. Do you think this infrastructure bill actually getting passed could sort of change the tide, change this trend we're seeing here for them?
That's certainly the hope on the part of the Democrats, and we're going to see President Biden applying one of those lessons learned from the Obama administration days. I remember after they passed the Affordable Care Act, after they passed the stimulus program early in the Obama administration, then Vice President Biden talked so often about how he didn't think Democrats did enough job selling what was in those proposals afterwards. They sort of quickly moved on to the next thing, and you're going to see that from the White House this week. Today, we're going to see in the briefing room Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg. He's going to be really a face of the bipartisan infrastructure proposals specifically, and we're going to see the president himself going on the road Wednesday to a port in Baltimore to talk about the real-world impacts that these proposals are going to have for the American people. The sausage making really did, especially on the Democratic side, make people exhausted, and now they want to see what they got from it, and that's going to be a big part of the White House's effort going forward.
The sausage making. That's exactly right, Mike. All right. Now, of course, this all also comes with the backdrop of the fact that midterms are only a year away. So far, 6 House Democrats have announced they are either retiring or running for a different office. Democrats only have an 8-person majority right now. I mean, this is not a good sign for Democrats looking to hold control of the House, is it?
No, and we know the historical trend lines here too, Savannah, right? The party in power typically loses seats in the first midterm election of a president's term. We saw it under President Trump. We saw it under President Obama. And we know that this White House is aware of that. That's why they've really been investing a lot of time and effort having the president sort of schedule his travel to some of these key districts that are going to be key in the next year. And that's why they're going to do this sales job as well, to try to show Democrats he's going to be there to help them in the end.
All right. Mike Memoli at the White House for us, by the way. Happy for us that you're back. Sad for you that you're not in Italy. I was following your trip on. You followed the Bidens there, and then I followed you on Instagram vicariously. Mike, good to see you. Thank you.
Thanks, Savannah.
Can we talk about the big weekend here in New York?
I know, yes.
Right? More than 30,000 runners took part in the 50th annual New York City Marathon yesterday. 5-borough run. It was suspended last year because, of course, of COVID, but it was back on in a huge way.
Yeah, it sure was. And in the pack were actually quite a few of our colleagues here, but one of them, our own Bill Cairns. Look at him right here. All right, listen to this. He tweeted this photo showing off his medal and that he ran the race in 3 hours and 38 minutes.
What?
Isn't that insane? It's a personal best, beating his previous best race by 42 minutes.
No, come on.
I know. And now he's getting some well-deserved rest this morning, but that is incredible. I know you're a runner, aren't you?
Yeah, but not like that.
I can't. I literally can't even wrap my head around it.
That's amazing. And 42 minutes off his best time
crazy.
is crazy.
Shaved so
Good
much
for
off.
him.
Bill, yay, Bill.
Yay, Bill. We've got a look at your morning news now. Weather now.
Yeah, just because Bill's off doesn't mean we're not going to give you the forecast. Janessa Webb is here while Bill continues to rest up. Hey, Janessa, good morning.
Good morning. I'm just so proud of Bill, his work ethic and his love for running. I mean, I'm just so proud. 40 minutes, that is huge, and I can't wait to see what he does next. If you ran that marathon, congratulations to all of our runners. We saw wonderful conditions across the Northeast over the weekend. We are watching a coastal system, though, right now that's pushing on shore across portions of the Carolinas all the way into the Northeast. We have coastal flood warnings in place from Jacksonville down to Fort Pierce. So if you're going to be doing some boating, going to the beach, the concern today is we're going to see waves 8 to 12 feet. So very dangerous conditions with this onshore flow. 15 million people impacted. This will not be an issue as we go into Tuesday. The problem is, as it pushes offshore, the National Hurricane Center has issued that possibility of this turning into something tropical. It will be no threat to the U.S., but we'll watch our friends in Bermuda where they could see some impacts in that area. Also, on the other coast, the West Coast, man, really feeling like winter. They have skipped fall in general, and we're watching a big area of low pressure making its way onshore this afternoon. We're talking about at least 3 to 5 inches of rain, up to 8 to 12 inches of snow across areas of the Rockies, making its way all the way into Salt Lake. Now, the good news is there's a middle part of the country that is dealing with some warmer air, and we'll talk about that coming up, ladies.
All right, that's a tease. Thank you, Janessa. See you next hour.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.